Nathan Maxwell's fingers drummed an impatient rhythm on his Italian leather briefcase as he watched sheets of rain cascade down the floor-to-ceiling windows of his 47th floor office. The downpour had transformed Chicago's financial district into a maze of reflective surfaces, distorting the familiar skyline into a watery mirage. "Mr. Maxwell," Sandra's voice crackled through the intercom. "The Japanese investors moved the meeting to Des AM. That's in," she paused, "25 minutes. Nathan's jaw clenched. He glanced at the Patek Philippe on his wrist, his father's last gift before succumbing to cancer 3 months ago. The smooth metal felt cool against his skin, a constant reminder of time's relentless march. "Thanks, Sandra. I'm on my way." He gathered his documents, mind racing through the details of the presentation. The old industrial district revitalization project hinged on this meeting. $2 billion and countless jobs were at stake. As he strode towards the panoramic elevator, Nathan caught his reflection in the polished steel doors. At 35, he cut an impressive figure in his tailored navy suit, but the shadows under his eyes betrayed the toll of recent months. Building a real estate empire had left little room for a personal life, and now, with both parents gone, the emptiness in his achievements felt more pronounced than ever. The elevator descended swiftly, offering fleeting glimpses of rain-soaked Chicago through its glass walls. Each floor represented a deal, a memory, a late night of hard work. But today, the familiar view felt oddly distant. In the lobby, Mike, the doorman who'd been a constant presence since Nathan's intern days, greeted him with a warm smile. "Nasty weather out there, Mr. Maxwell. Your car's waiting." "Thanks, Mike. Stay dry." But as Nathan stepped out, the sleek black Audi that usually awaited him was nowhere to be seen. His phone buzzed. A text from Thomas, his driver, stuck in a pileup on the Kennedy Expressway. Muttering under his breath, Nathan scanned the street for a taxi, but every cab that passed was occupied, their red lights glowing accusingly through the downpour. His wool coat, usually impeccable, began to soak through as he ventured further from the building's protective overhang. That's when he saw her. Huddled in a recessed doorway of a closed storefront, a young woman cradled a bundle tightly against her chest. Her dark hair clung to her face in wet strands, and she seemed to be trying to make herself as small as possible against the building's facade. The bundle, a baby, Nathan realized with a start, was letting out sharp, pitiful cries that cut through the white noise of the rain. Nathan hesitated. The meeting loomed, a ticking time bomb of opportunity. But something about the scene before him tugged at a long-buried memory. "Ma'am," he called out, approaching slowly and extending his umbrella to shelter them both. "Are you all right?" The woman looked up, revealing eyes dark with exhaustion and fear. We're fine," she stammered, her voice barely audible above the storm. Nathan's gaze fell to the baby, its tiny fists clenched against the cold. The child couldn't have been more than a few months old. "You can't stay here," he said, surprising himself with the gentleness in his voice. He glanced at his watch again. 9:40. His townhouse was just 2 blocks away. The decision he made next would alter the course of his life forever. "Look," he said, fishing his keys from his pocket. "My home is nearby. 1220 North State Parkway, apartment 1501. There's food, towels, heat." He held out the keys, watching the internal struggle play out on the woman's face. "Why?" she asked, suspicion warring with desperate need in her eyes. Nathan thought of his mother, of stories his father used to tell about the hard times before success. "Because someone once did the same for my family," he replied simply. The baby whimpered again, a sound that seemed to make the decision for her. With trembling fingers, she accepted the keys. "I'm Maria," she said softly. "And this is Sophie." Nathan scribbled his personal number on the back of a business card. "Call if you need anything. I'll let the doorman know you're coming." As he flagged down a passing taxi and paid the driver in advance, Nathan caught a glimpse of gratitude in Maria's eyes that stirred something long dormant within him. "Just get warm and take care of Sophie," he said, closing the car door on her thanks. As the taxi pulled away, Nathan turned back to the rain-soaked street, the weight of his upcoming meeting suddenly feeling insignificant compared to the exchange that had just transpired. The conference room buzzed with low conversation as Nathan strode in at precisely 0 a.m. His exterior a mask of collected professionalism that belied the tumult of his thoughts. Mr. Tanaka, the lead investor, rose to greet him with a slight bow. "Mr. Maxwell," Tanaka said, his accent clipping the words. "We were beginning to worry the storm had delayed you." "Not at all," Nathan replied smoothly, setting up his presentation materials with practiced ease. "Shall we begin?" As he launched into his opening remarks about the future of Chicago's industrial corridor, Nathan found his mind split between the projections on the screen and the image of Maria and Sophie huddled in that doorway. The juxtaposition of the billions at stake in this room and the desperate need he'd encountered on the street struck him with unexpected force. "The old Pullman district," Nathan heard himself saying, "isn't just a collection of abandoned factories. It's a community waiting to be reborn. Our vision isn't just about profit. It's about creating jobs, homes, and opportunities for families who need them most." Mr. Tanaka leaned forward, interest piqued. "You speak of social impact, Mr. Maxwell. How does this align with our projected returns?" Nathan felt a surge of inspiration. "Studies show that developments with a strong community focus have higher long-term value and stability. By integrating affordable housing and local businesses alongside our high-end properties, we create a diverse, vibrant neighborhood that's resistant to market fluctuations." As he delved into the financial projections, Nathan's thoughts kept drifting to his apartment. Had Maria and Sophie arrived safely? Were they warm now? He made a mental note to call George, the doorman, during the first break. The meeting stretched on, questions flying back and forth across the polished conference table. Nathan found himself speaking with a passion that surprised even him, painting a picture of a revitalized Chicago that went beyond mere profit margins. "Imagine," he said, pulling up a 3D rendering of the proposed development, "a place where a single mother can find both a job and affordable childcare, where a young chef can open their first restaurant with community support, where families can put down roots and build a future." As he spoke, Nathan realized he wasn't just selling a real estate deal anymore. He was articulating a vision of the kind of world he wanted to build, one where chance encounters in the rain could lead to real change. The Japanese investors exchanged glances, their earlier skepticism giving way to cautious excitement. Mr. Tanaka cleared his throat. "Your passion is evident, Mr. Maxwell, but passion alone does not guarantee success. We will need to see more detailed financial projections, particularly regarding the community integration aspects." "Of course," Nathan nodded, relief and anticipation mingling in his chest. "I can have those to you by the end of the week." As the meeting adjourned, Nathan felt a subtle shift in the room's energy. The investors lingered, engaging him in conversation that went beyond business, touching on their own experiences with urban renewal projects in Japan. It was nearly 2 p.m. when Nathan finally made it back to his office. He collapsed into his chair, the adrenaline of the presentation giving way to a bone-deep exhaustion. But as he reached for his phone to check for messages, he felt a spark of something he hadn't experienced in a long time. Hope. There were no calls from Maria, but a text from George confirmed she and the baby had arrived safely hours ago. Nathan stared out at the city, the rain now a gentle mist, and made a decision. The financial projections could wait. Right now, there was somewhere else he needed to be. The elevator ride up to his penthouse felt interminable. Nathan loosened his tie, suddenly aware of the constraint it represented. As the doors slid open, he was struck by an unfamiliar scent wafting down the hallway. Something warm and inviting that made his stomach growl in reminder that he'd skipped lunch. He paused at his own door, key in hand, feeling like a stranger in his own home. Taking a deep breath, he turned the lock and stepped inside. The transformation was immediate and startling. His usually stark, showroom-perfect apartment hummed with life. Soft music played from the kitchen, mingling with the gentle bubbling of something on the stove. Several pairs of shoes, much smaller than his own, were neatly arranged by the door. "Hello?" he called out, moving cautiously into his own space. "Oh, Mr. Maxwell." Maria appeared from the kitchen, wiping her hands on a dish towel. She looked different, cleaned up, wearing what appeared to be newly purchased clothes. The haunted look in her eyes had been replaced by a nervous energy. "I hope you don't mind. I used your credit card for some essentials. I kept all the receipts. Of course." Before Nathan could respond, an older woman emerged from the guest bedroom, cradling baby Sophie. "Maria, La Niña is all changed." "Oh." She stopped short at the sight of Nathan. "Mr. Maxwell, this is my mother, Rosa," Maria explained quickly. I couldn't leave her out there. She's been helping with Sophie while She gestured toward the kitchen. Nathan followed her gesture and felt his jaw drop slightly. His pristine, barely used kitchen had been transformed into a warm, lived-in space. Every surface gleamed, but clearly from recent use rather than disuse. Something that smelled divine simmered on the stove. "I used to be a professional cook," Maria continued, words tumbling out nervously. "I thought, well, it was the least I could do to thank you. I made enough for several meals. They're labeled and frozen. And I cleaned everything, organized your pantry, even fixed that loose cabinet handle." She trailed off, watching his face anxiously. Nathan looked around, taking in the subtle but significant changes. His typically cold, impersonal space had been infused with warmth and life. The contrast was jarring but not unpleasant. "Please, sit," Maria insisted, pulling out a chair at his own dining table. "You must be hungry after such a long day." Nathan found himself obeying, still processing the situation. Rosa settled Sophie into a newly purchased portable crib in the corner of the dining room, cooing softly to the baby in Spanish. Maria served a bowl of what looked like beef stew, the aroma making Nathan's mouth water. "I should explain," Maria said, sitting across from him. Her fingers twisted nervously in her lap. "My mother and we lost everything 3 months ago. I was head chef at La Maison. But when Sophie was born with medical complications, the bills..." She took a shaky breath. "My husband couldn't handle it. He left us with nothing but debts." Rosa reached over, squeezing her daughter's hand. The gesture spoke volumes about their relationship, the strength they drew from each other. "We were managing in a small apartment until last week," Rosa added, her accented English soft but clear. "The building was condemned without warning. With Sophie's condition, no shelter would take us all together." Nathan set down his spoon. The stew, possibly the best thing he'd ever tasted, momentarily forgotten. "Medical condition?" "A heart defect," Maria explained, her eyes darting to the sleeping baby. "Nothing fatal, but she needs monitoring, medication. The social worker talked about taking her into state care, but..." Tears welled in her eyes, and she brushed them away quickly. A heavy silence fell over the table, broken only by Sophie's soft breathing. Nathan found himself thinking of his own mother's illness, the helplessness he'd felt as a child watching his parents struggle, the desperate need for someone, anyone, to show a little kindness. "The receipts," he said suddenly, surprising himself. "How much did you spend?" Maria quickly retrieved an envelope from the kitchen counter. "Everything's itemized. I know I shouldn't have used your card, but Sophie needed formula, and we needed clean clothes to look presentable for job interviews. I promise we'll pay back every cent." Nathan reviewed the receipts, noting the modest, practical purchases. As he did, he observed the interaction between Maria, Rosa, and Sophie. Their love for each other was palpable, their dignity intact despite their circumstances. He thought of his presentation earlier that day, of the vision he'd painted of a community where people could thrive. "I have a proposal," he said finally, setting down the receipts. Maria and Rosa exchanged a wary glance. "The guest house behind my parents' old home in Lake Forest has been empty since my father passed away," Nathan continued. "It's furnished, close to good schools and hospitals. And," he added, a plan forming as he spoke, "I happen to know that the new development I'm working on will need a high-end restaurant. The kind of place that could benefit from an experienced head chef who knows how to run a kitchen." He could see hope dawning in Maria's eyes, quickly followed by suspicion. "Why would you do this for us? You don't even know us." Nathan was quiet for a moment, looking around his apartment. For the first time since his father's death, it felt like a home rather than just an expensive space. When I was 12, he began slowly, my mother got sick. Cancer. My father was still building his business, and we lost everything to medical bills. One day, a stranger saw us in the rain, much like I saw you this morning. She owned a small diner, gave my mother a job, let us live in the apartment above it. That kindness saved our family. He stood, walking to the window. The city lights twinkled through the lingering raindrops on the glass, a constellation of possibilities. Sometimes, he said, turning back to Maria and Rosa, the universe gives us a chance to pay forward the kindness we've received. I'm not offering charity. I'm offering an opportunity. The same kind someone once offered my family. As he spoke the words, Nathan felt something shift inside him. The loneliness that had been his constant companion began to recede, replaced by a sense of purpose he hadn't felt in years. Maria and Rosa sat in stunned silence, the magnitude of the offer sinking in. Sophie stirred in her crib, letting out a soft coo that seemed to break the spell. "Mr. Maxwell, Nathan," Maria began, her voice thick with emotion. "I don't know what to say." "Say you'll consider it," Nathan replied, surprising himself with the gentle tone of his voice. "We can work out the details tomorrow. For now, let's just enjoy this excellent meal you've prepared." As they resumed eating, the atmosphere in the apartment changed. The air felt lighter, charged with possibility. Nathan found himself genuinely smiling for the first time in months, realizing that in his attempt to help this small family, he might have inadvertently helped himself as well. Outside, the rain had finally stopped. The city gleamed, washed clean, ready for whatever the new day might bring. The following week unfolded in a whirlwind of activity. Nathan found himself juggling his usual business responsibilities with an entirely new set of tasks that, surprisingly, brought him more satisfaction than any real estate deal ever had. On a crisp Monday morning, Nathan stood in the driveway of his family's Lake Forest estate, watching as a moving truck carefully navigated the tree-lined entrance. Maria and Rosa sat in his SUV, Sophie securely fastened in a new car seat between them. The women's eyes were wide, taking in the sprawling grounds and the Victorian mansion that loomed in the background. "My father restored it himself," Nathan explained as they drove past the main house towards the guest cottage. "He always said that every crack in these walls had a story." The guest house, while smaller, was equally charming. A two-story structure with a wraparound porch and bay windows. Fresh paint and new shutters showed that the property manager had been busy preparing for their arrival. As they walked up the path, Nathan pointed to a well-maintained flower bed. "This was my mother's garden. She spent hours out here. The vegetable and herb gardens are around back. I thought you might want to use them for recipe testing." Maria. Inside, modern amenities blended seamlessly with traditional architecture. The kitchen, though modest compared to a restaurant's, was fully equipped with professional-grade appliances. Nathan watched as Maria ran her hand over the smooth countertop, a look of disbelief and growing excitement on her face. "The previous caretaker left last year," Nathan explained, showing them around. "The house has been empty since then. It needs a family in it." Rosa stood by the kitchen window, watching a pair of cardinals at a nearby bird feeder. "Es como un sueño," she whispered, then caught herself and repeated in English, "It's like a dream." As Maria explored the bedrooms upstairs, Nathan helped Rosa settle Sophie for her nap in what would become the nursery. The room had been hastily but thoughtfully prepared, with soft yellow walls and white curtains filtering the afternoon sun. "Mr. Maxwell," Rosa began hesitantly as they stepped out of the nursery. "Please, call me Nathan," he insisted gently. Rosa nodded, her eyes brimming with tears. "Nathan, I don't know how to thank you for all of this. When Maria lost her job, when that man left her, I thought we had lost everything. But now..." She gestured around her, at a loss for words. Nathan felt a lump form in his throat. "You don't need to thank me," he said softly. "Just make this a home. That's all the thanks I need." Later that afternoon, Nathan sat with Maria on the porch, reviewing plans for the restaurant while Rosa prepared dinner inside. The autumn air was crisp, carrying the scent of fallen leaves and possibility. "The construction team breaks ground next month," Nathan explained, spreading blueprints across the patio table. "You'll have complete control over the kitchen design. The restaurant will be the centerpiece of the development. Upscale but approachable, just like your cooking." Maria studied the plans, making notes and suggesting modifications. Her confidence grew as they discussed the project, her professional expertise shining through her previous uncertainty. "We could source from local farms," she suggested, excitement building in her voice. "I know several suppliers from my time at La Maison, and this space here," she pointed to a corner of the blueprint, "would be perfect for a herb garden. Fresh ingredients, visible to diners." Nathan watched her come alive as she planned, remembering what George, his doorman, had said about her background. He'd done some discreet checking. Maria's reputation in Chicago's culinary scene was stellar. Her former restaurant had suffered after her departure. "The development will include affordable housing units," Nathan mentioned. "Part of our commitment to the community. The residents there might appreciate cooking classes, if someone were interested in teaching them." Maria looked up from the blueprints, her eyes bright. "Community outreach? I used to dream about starting a program like that, teaching people how to cook nutritious meals on a budget." "Dreams have a way of coming back around," Nathan said, thinking of his own journey. "Sometimes they just need a little help getting started." As the sun began to set, casting long shadows across the lawn, Nathan watched Maria return inside to help her mother with dinner. Through the window, he could see them working together in the kitchen, their movements synchronized, comfortable. Sophie's laughter echoed from her playpen. For the first time since his father's death, Nathan felt the weight of loneliness lift slightly. He'd given these women a chance at a new life, but somehow, they were giving him something equally valuable in return, a reminder of what home really meant. The weeks that followed were a flurry of activity, both at the Lake Forest house and in the bustling heart of Chicago. Nathan found himself straddling two worlds, the high-stakes realm of real estate development and the quieter, but no less important, world of Maria, Rosa, and Sophie. One chilly October morning, Nathan stood before the board of directors, presenting the final plans for the Pullman District revitalization. The room was tense, filled with skeptical faces and raised eyebrows. "Gentlemen," Nathan began, his voice steady and confident, "what I'm proposing isn't just a real estate development, it's a blueprint for community renewal." He clicked through slides, showcasing not just the sleek high-rises and modern office spaces, but also the affordable housing units, the community center, and the crown jewel, a high-end restaurant that would serve as both a culinary destination and a training ground for aspiring chefs from the community. "By integrating social responsibility into our business model," Nathan explained, "we're not just building structures, we're building a sustainable, vibrant community that will yield returns for decades to come." There was a moment of silence as he concluded his presentation. Then, slowly, the questions began. They were tough, probing, but Nathan found himself answering with a passion and conviction that surprised even him. He spoke of market trends, of the growing demand for socially responsible investments, and of the long-term benefits of community integration. As the meeting adjourned, Nathan could feel the shift in the room. The initial skepticism had given way to cautious optimism. Board members lingered, engaging him in conversations that went beyond mere profit margins. Later that evening, as Nathan drove to Lake Forest, he reflected on the day's events. The board's approval was a crucial step, but he knew the real work was just beginning. Arriving at the guest house, Nathan was greeted by the now familiar sounds of a busy kitchen and Sophie's delighted giggles. He paused in the doorway, taking in the scene before him. Maria stood at the stove, expertly flipping something in a pan while explaining the process to Rosa, who was taking notes. Sophie sat in her high chair, happily mashing banana between her fingers. The kitchen was alive with warmth, scents, and the easy banter of family. "Nathan," Maria exclaimed, noticing him. Come in. You're just in time to be our taste tester." As he stepped into the kitchen, Nathan felt the stresses of the day melt away. He accepted a plate from Maria, savoring the complex flavors of her latest creation. "This is incredible," he said between bites. "Is this for the restaurant menu?" Maria nodded, a mix of pride and nervousness on her face. "I've been experimenting with fusion dishes, combining traditional Latin flavors with modern American cuisine. What do you think? Too adventurous for the Pullman crowd?" Nathan shook his head, reaching for another bite. "It's perfect. It's exactly the kind of innovation we need. Speaking of which," he added, setting down his fork, "I have some news." He told them about the board meeting, about the approval of the plans, including the restaurant and the community programs. As he spoke, he watched Maria's eyes grow wide with excitement, and Rosa cross herself silently in gratitude. "It's really happening, isn't it?" Maria whispered, her voice thick with emotion. Nathan nodded, feeling a surge of pride and purpose. "It is, and it's going to change lives, Maria. Not just yours, but so many others in the community." Later, as they sat on the porch watching the sun set over the lake, Nathan found himself opening up about his own past. He told them about his mother's illness, about the struggles his family had faced, and about the kindness of strangers that had changed their trajectory. "I never understood why my father pushed so hard," Nathan admitted, his voice soft in the gathering twilight. "But now I think I get it. He wasn't just building a business. He was trying to create security, to make sure we never felt that vulnerable again." Maria reached out, placing her hand on his arm. The gesture was simple, but comforting. "And now you're doing the same for others," she said. "Your parents would be proud, Nathan." As the stars began to appear in the darkening sky, Nathan felt a sense of peace settle over him. The path ahead was challenging, filled with obstacles and uncertainties. But for the first time in a long time, he felt like he was exactly where he was meant to be. As autumn gave way to winter, the Pullman District project began to take shape. The once abandoned factories and warehouses buzzed with activity as construction crews worked tirelessly to bring Nathan's vision to life. But with progress came unexpected hurdles. One frosty December morning, Nathan arrived at the construction site to find a group of protesters gathered at the entrance. Their signs bore slogans like, "Stop gentrification," and "Homes not high-rises." The sight made his heart sink. "Mr. Maxwell," his site manager greeted him, looking harried. "They've been here since dawn, local community group, worried about being priced out of the neighborhood." Nathan nodded, his mind racing. This was exactly the kind of situation he'd hoped to avoid. "Have you talked to them?" The manager shook his head. "They're asking to speak to you directly." Taking a deep breath, Nathan straightened his tie and approached the group. "Good morning," he called out, his voice carrying over the chants. "I'm Nathan Maxwell. I understand you have concerns about our project. I'm here to listen." The protesters fell silent, exchanging surprised glances. A woman in her 50s, her gray hair peeking out from under a woolen hat, stepped forward. "Mr. Maxwell," she began, her tone wary but not hostile. "I'm Gloria Washington. I've lived in Pullman all my life. We've seen developers come and go, making big promises and leaving us with nothing but higher rents and displaced families. How is your project any different?" Nathan met her gaze steadily. "Mrs. Washington, I appreciate your concern. It's valid, and I'd like to address it. Would you and your group be willing to join me for a cup of coffee? I'd like to share our plans in detail and hear your thoughts." Gloria hesitated, then nodded. "All right, Mr. Maxwell, we're listening." Over the next 2 hours, in a hastily arranged meeting in the site office, Nathan laid out the project plans. He explained the affordable housing units, the job training programs, and the community center. He spoke of Maria's restaurant and the culinary training initiative for local youth. "Our goal isn't to push anyone out," Nathan emphasized. "It's to lift the entire community. But I'll be honest, we can't do it without your input and support." As the meeting progressed, Nathan could see the skepticism in Gloria's eyes gradually being replaced by cautious interest. "It sounds good on paper, Mr. Maxwell," she said finally. "But we've heard promises before. How can we be sure you'll follow through?" Nathan thought for a moment, then made a decision. "I'd like to invite you and your group to be part of our community advisory board. You'll have direct input on decisions that affect the neighborhood. We'll have regular meetings, and you'll have my personal guarantee that your concerns will be heard and addressed." The room fell silent as Gloria and her companions exchanged glances. Finally, she turned back to Nathan, a small smile playing at the corners of her mouth. "Well, Mr. Maxwell, that's certainly a start. We'll take you up on that offer. But know this, we'll be watching closely. This is our home, and we'll fight for it if we have to." Nathan nodded, feeling a mix of relief and new determination. "I wouldn't expect anything less, Mrs. Washington. Welcome aboard." As the protesters left, their signs now rolled up and tucked under their arms, Nathan's phone buzzed. It was a text from Maria. "Emergency at the house. Please come when you can." Concern knotted in Nathan's stomach as he rushed to his car. The drive to Lake Forest seemed interminable, his mind conjuring worst-case scenarios with each passing mile. When he finally arrived at the guest house, he found Maria pacing in the living room, her face pale with worry. Rosa sat on the couch, cradling a fussy Sophie. "What happened?" Nathan asked, his eyes darting between them. Maria ran a hand through her hair, her voice shaky. "It's Sophie. Her heart. There were complications. The doctor says she needs surgery, soon. But our insurance, it won't cover all of it, and the waiting list for financial assistance is months long." Nathan felt his chest tighten. He'd grown attached to the little girl over the past months, her toothless smiles and determined crawling bringing unexpected joy to his life. "How much?" he asked quietly. Maria named a figure that made Nathan's eyebrows rise. It was substantial, even by his standards. "I hate to ask," Maria continued, her voice barely above a whisper. "You've already done so much for us, but I don't know what else to do. I can't lose her, Nathan. I can't." Nathan looked at Sophie, at her tiny form nestled against Rosa's chest. He thought of the protesters he'd met that morning, of the promises he'd made, of the delicate balance between business and compassion. Then he thought of his own mother, of the stranger who had extended a helping hand when his family needed it most, of the ripple effect that one act of kindness had created. His decision was made in an instant. "Make the appointment," he said, his voice firm. "I'll take care of it." Maria's eyes filled with tears. "Nathan, He held up a hand, stopping her. "We're in this together now, all of us. Sophie's going to get the care she needs, and then she's going to grow up to be an amazing chef just like her mom, okay?" As Maria nodded, dissolving into grateful tears, Nathan felt a familiar warmth spread through his chest. The challenges ahead were daunting, balancing the needs of the Pullman community, the demands of his investors, and now this personal commitment. But as he looked at the small family before him, at the trust and hope in their eyes, he knew that every struggle would be worth it. Outside, the first snowflakes of winter began to fall, blanketing the world in a soft, white silence. Inside, in the warmth of the guest house, a different kind of foundation was being laid, one of compassion, commitment, and the unbreakable bonds of chosen family. The weeks following Sophie's diagnosis were a blur of hospital visits, late-night research sessions, and frantic phone calls. Nathan threw himself into the task of securing the best possible care for the little girl, leveraging every connection he had in Chicago's medical community. On a gray January morning, Nathan found himself pacing the sterile hallways of Northwestern Memorial Hospital's pediatric wing. The harsh fluorescent lights and antiseptic smell brought back painful memories of his mother's illness, but he pushed them aside, focusing on the present. Maria and Rosa sat huddled together in the waiting room, their faces etched with worry. Sophie had been in surgery for over 4 hours, her tiny heart in the skilled hands of Dr. Sarah Chen, one of the country's top pediatric cardiothoracic surgeons. Nathan's phone buzzed incessantly with messages from work. The Pullman project was at a critical stage, and his absence was being felt. But he couldn't bring himself to leave, not until he knew Sophie was safe. "Mr. Maxwell?" Nathan turned to see Dr. Chen approaching, her surgical cap still on. His heart leapt into his throat. "The surgery was successful," she said, a small smile breaking through her professional demeanor. "Sophie is a fighter. She's in recovery now, and her prognosis is excellent." The relief that flooded through Nathan was overwhelming. He watched as Maria and Rosa embraced, tears of joy streaming down their faces. In that moment, he knew that every string he'd pulled, every favor he'd called in, had been worth it. As the days passed and Sophie grew stronger, Nathan found himself spending more and more time at the hospital. He'd set up a makeshift office in the family waiting room, juggling conference calls and project updates between visits to Sophie's room. One evening, as he sat by Sophie's bedside, the little girl sleeping peacefully for the first time in weeks, Maria joined him. "You should go home. Get some rest," she said softly, placing a hand on his shoulder. "You've done so much already." Nathan shook his head, his eyes never leaving Sophie's face. "I'm right where I need to be." Maria was quiet for a moment, then spoke again, her voice thick with emotion. "Why, Nathan? Why do all this for us? I know you said it's about paying forward kindness, but this goes beyond that." Nathan was silent for a long moment, gathering his thoughts. When he finally spoke, his voice was low and reflective. "When my mother was sick, I felt so helpless. I was just a kid, watching my parents struggle, unable to do anything. I promised myself that if I ever had the chance to make a difference, to help someone the way we needed help back then, I'd do it without hesitation." He turned to look at Maria, his eyes shining with unshed tears. "But it's more than that now. You, Rosa, Sophie, you've become family, and family takes care of each other." Maria's hand found his, squeezing gently. No more words were needed. As winter thawed into spring, both Sophie and the Pullman project began to flourish. The little girl's recovery was nothing short of miraculous, her resilience a constant source of inspiration for Nathan as he tackled the challenges of the development. One sunny April morning, Nathan stood on the scaffolding of what would soon be Maria's restaurant, surveying the progress. The bones of the building were in place, and he could almost see the bustling eatery it would become. "Mr. Maxwell," a voice called from below. It was Gloria Washington, now a key member of the Community Advisory Board. "Got a minute?" Nathan climbed down to meet her, curious about what brought her to the site. Gloria had been a tough but fair advocate for the community, her initial skepticism gradually giving way to cautious optimism as she saw Nathan's commitment to his promises. "Mrs. Washington, what can I do for you?" he asked, wiping his hands on his jeans. Gloria handed him a folder. "It's what we can do for you, actually. The board's been talking, and we have some ideas we'd like you to consider." Nathan opened the folder to find detailed proposals for additional community programs. A daycare center for working parents, a mentorship program connecting local teens with professionals in various fields, and an expansion of the culinary training initiative. "These are fantastic," Nathan said, genuine excitement in his voice. "But they'll require additional funding, resources." Gloria nodded, a determined glint in her eye. "We know. That's why we've also included a list of local businesses willing to partner on these initiatives. We've done our homework, Mr. Maxwell. We're invested in making this work." Nathan felt a surge of pride and gratitude. This was exactly the kind of community engagement he'd hoped for but hadn't dared to expect. "I'll need to run this by the board," he said, "but you have my full support. Thank you, Mrs. Washington. This is what real progress looks like." As Gloria left, Nathan's phone rang. It was Maria. "Nathan, you need to come to the house. Now." The urgency in her voice sent a chill through him. "Is it Sophie? Is she okay?" "Sophie's fine," Maria assured him quickly. "It's... just come. Please." The drive to Lake Forest seemed to take forever, Nathan's mind racing with possibilities. When he finally arrived at the guest house, he was met with an unexpected sight. The front yard was filled with people, Gloria Washington and members of the community board, construction workers from the Pullman site, nurses from Sophie's hospital ward, and at the center of it all, Maria, Rosa, and a giggling Sophie. "Surprise!" the group shouted as Nathan stepped out of his car. Maria approached, Sophie on her hip. "We couldn't let today pass without celebrating," she said, smiling broadly. Nathan blinked, confused. "Celebrating what?" "Your birthday, of course," Rosa chimed in, emerging from the house with a large cake. "Did you really think we'd forget?" The truth was, Nathan had forgotten. In the whirlwind of the past months, His own birthday had completely slipped his mind. He looked around at the gathered crowd, people from every facet of his life, all here to celebrate him. As the impromptu party got underway, Nathan found himself overwhelmed with emotion. He watched as Gloria chatted animatedly with his project managers about the new community initiatives. He saw Sophie toddling from person to person, charming everyone with her newfound energy and joyful babbles. Maria appeared at his side, handing him a plate of food. "Happy birthday, Nathan," she said softly. "I hope you don't mind the surprise. We wanted to show you how much you mean to all of us." Nathan shook his head, unable to speak for a moment. When he finally found his voice, it was thick with emotion. I've never had anything like this before. Thank you." As the sun began to set, casting a warm glow over the gathering, Nathan stood on the porch, taking in the scene before him. In that moment, he realized that his life had been irrevocably changed. What had started as a simple act of kindness on a rainy morning had blossomed into something far greater. A network of relationships, a sense of purpose, and a feeling of belonging he'd never experienced before. The Pullman project was no longer just a business venture. It was a testament to the power of community, of second chances, and of the remarkable things that could happen when people came together with a shared vision. As Sophie toddled up to him, arms raised in a silent request to be picked up, Nathan felt a sense of peace settle over him. The challenges ahead were still daunting, but he knew now that he wouldn't face them alone. The grand opening of Casa Sofia was set for a warm evening in late June, exactly 1 year after that fateful rainy morning when Nathan had first encountered Maria and Sophie. The restaurant gleamed in the setting sun, its copper accents and warm lighting creating an inviting ambiance visible even from the street. Nathan adjusted his tie nervously as he watched the final preparations from the entrance. Inside, Maria directed her kitchen staff with the confidence of a seasoned commander, her chef's whites crisp and pristine. The transformation from the desperate woman he'd met in the rain to this poised, professional chef was nothing short of remarkable. The governor just confirmed his reservation. Sandra, Nathan's assistant, informed him, tablet in hand. Food critics from the Tribune and Sun-Times are also on the list. Nathan nodded, feeling a mix of pride and anxiety. Maria's ready. She was born for this. As the first guests began to arrive, Nathan caught Maria's eye across the busy dining room. She gave him a confident nod. Everything was perfect. The evening unfolded like a well-orchestrated symphony. Nathan moved from table to table, greeting guests and ensuring everything ran smoothly. He watched with pride as Maria emerged from the kitchen periodically, receiving enthusiastic compliments from diners. At one point, he found himself at a table with Gloria Washington and several members of the community board. "This is more than we ever imagined, Mr. Maxwell," Gloria said, gesturing around the packed restaurant. "You've not just kept your promises, you've exceeded them." Nathan smiled, feeling a warmth spread through his chest. "This is just the beginning, Mrs. Washington. Wait until you see what we have planned for the community center." As the night wore on, Nathan noticed a commotion near the kitchen. Curious, he made his way over, only to find Maria emerging with a special dish, her eyes scanning the room until they landed on him. "Nathan," she called out, "this is for you." She set the plate down at an empty table, gesturing for him to sit. It was a dish he didn't recognize, a beautiful fusion of colors and textures that made his mouth water just looking at it. "What's this?" he asked as Maria sat across from him. "It's something new," she explained, her eyes shining with excitement. "I call it second chances. It's a combination of flavors from my childhood in Mexico and ingredients native to Chicago. I wanted to create something that represented our journey, yours, mine, Sophie's, and this whole community's." Nathan took a bite, and the flavors exploded on his tongue. Bright citrus, rich spices, and a depth that spoke of history and hope intertwined. It was quite simply the best thing he'd ever tasted. "Maria, this is incredible," he said, his voice filled with awe. She beamed at him, then grew serious. "Nathan, I know I've said it before, but I need to say it again. Thank you for everything. You didn't just give us a second chance, you showed us how to make the most of it." Nathan reached across the table, squeezing her hand gently. "You did all the hard work, Maria. I just opened a door. You're the one who walked through it and created all of this." As they sat there, sharing the symbolic dish and watching the bustling restaurant around them, Nathan felt a sense of completion. The vision he'd had for the Pullman Project, of a thriving, integrated community where everyone had a chance to succeed, was becoming a reality before his eyes. Later that night, after the last guest had left and the staff was cleaning up, Nathan stood outside the restaurant, looking up at the star-filled sky. He thought about how much had changed in a year, not just in the physical landscape of Pullman, but in his own life. He was no longer the lonely, driven businessman focused solely on the next deal. He had found a family in Maria, Rosa, and Sophie. He had connected with his community in ways he never thought possible. And most importantly, he had rediscovered the sense of purpose that had driven his father all those years ago. As he turned to go back inside, he saw Maria emerge from the restaurant, Sophie sleepily resting her head on her mother's shoulder. Rosa followed close behind, her face etched with tired satisfaction. "Ready to go home?" Nathan asked, realizing as he said it that home now meant something entirely different to him. Maria nodded, a soft smile playing on her lips. "Yes, let's go home." As they walked to the car, Nathan felt a tugging on his sleeve. He looked down to see Sophie reaching out to him, her eyes heavy with sleep but still full of trust and affection. Without hesitation, he scooped her up, cradling her small form against his chest. As Sophie's breathing evened out into the deep rhythms of sleep, Nathan felt a profound sense of peace wash over him. This, he realized, was what true success felt like. Not the numbers in a bank account or the height of a skyscraper, but the warmth of a child's trust, the satisfaction of a community uplifted, and the knowledge that he was exactly where he was meant to be. As they drove back to Lake Forest under the canopy of stars, Nathan knew that while this chapter of their story was closing, a new one, filled with even greater possibilities, was just beginning. 5 years later, the crisp autumn air carried the scent of fallen leaves and possibility as Nathan Maxwell stood on the steps of Chicago's City Hall. The crowd before him was a sea of faces, some familiar, others new, but all united in purpose. "Ladies and gentlemen," Mayor Gloria Washington's voice boomed over the speakers, "it is my great honor to present this year's Humanitarian of the Year award to a man who has redefined what it means to invest in a community. Please join me in welcoming Mr. Nathan Maxwell." The applause was thunderous as Nathan approached the podium. He scanned the crowd, his heart swelling at the sight of familiar faces. In the front row, Maria sat with Sophie, now a lively 7-year-old, on her lap. Rosa, her hair now more silver than black, dabbed at her eyes with a handkerchief. Behind them, he spotted members of the original Pullman Community Board, construction workers from the project, and even Dr. Chen, who had saved Sophie's life all those years ago. As the applause died down, Nathan cleared his throat and began to speak. 5 years ago, I stood on a rain-soaked street, thinking I knew what success looked like. I thought it was about building the tallest buildings, closing the biggest deals. I couldn't have been more wrong. He paused, his eyes finding Maria's in the crowd. She gave him an encouraging nod. True success, I've learned, is measured not in dollars and cents, but in lives touched and communities transformed. The Pullman Project wasn't just about revitalizing a neighborhood. It was about restoring hope, creating opportunities, and proving that when we invest in each other, we all rise together. Nathan went on to detail the achievements of the past 5 years, the thriving businesses that had sprung up in Pullman, the affordable housing that had allowed families to put down roots, the community programs that had given young people new paths to success. He spoke of Casa Sofia, now a Michelin-starred restaurant and culinary school that had launched dozens of careers. But perhaps the greatest success, Nathan continued, his voice softening, has been the families reunited, the dreams rekindled, and the bonds forged between people who might never have met if not for this project. We've created more than buildings and businesses. We've created a community in the truest sense of the word. As he concluded his speech, Nathan felt a tug on his pant leg. He looked down to see Sophie, who had apparently escaped Maria's grasp, grinning up at him. Without missing a beat, he scooped her up, settling her on his hip as the crowd chuckled warmly. "This award," Nathan said, his arm around Sophie, "doesn't belong to me alone. It belongs to every person who believed in this vision, who rolled up their sleeves and did the hard work of turning dreams into reality. It belongs to the people of Pullman, to the city of Chicago, and to this little one right here, who reminded me what truly matters in life." The ceremony concluded with another round of applause. But for Nathan, the real celebration came after. In a small park near the revitalized Pullman district, a gathering was held, not of city officials or business leaders, but of the people who had been part of this journey from the beginning. Food from Casa Sofia was served as children played on the new playground equipment. Nathan watched as Sophie led a group of kids in an impromptu game of tag, her laughter ringing out across the park. "You've done good, Mr. Maxwell," a familiar voice said beside him. Nathan turned to see Eleanor Thompson, the woman who had helped his family all those years ago. He had tracked her down shortly after the Pullman project began, wanting to thank her properly for the kindness she had shown his parents. "I had good teachers," Nathan replied, smiling warmly at the elderly woman. "You taught me the value of giving people a chance. My parents showed me the importance of perseverance, and Maria, Rosa, and Sophie. They taught me what it really means to be part of a family." As if on cue, Maria appeared at his side, slipping her hand into his. The simple gold band on her finger caught the late afternoon sunlight, a recent addition that still made Nathan's heart skip a beat when he saw it. "Speaking of family," Maria said, her eyes twinkling, "we have an announcement to make." Nathan raised an eyebrow, a mix of curiosity and excitement building in his chest. Maria's free hand rested gently on her stomach, a soft smile playing on her lips. "Sophie's going to be a big sister." Joy surged through Nathan, rendering him momentarily speechless. He pulled Maria close, overwhelmed by the rush of emotions. As the sun began to set, casting a warm glow over the gathering, Nathan found himself reflecting on the journey that had led to this moment. From that rainy morning encounter to the thriving community around him, from a life of solitary success to one rich with love and purpose, it had been a transformation beyond anything he could have imagined. Sophie ran up to them, breathless from her game. "Papa," she said, the words still new and wonderful to Nathan's ears, "come play with us." As Nathan allowed himself to be led to the playground, Maria and Rosa following close behind, he felt a profound sense of gratitude wash over him. This, he realized, was the true meaning of coming full circle, not ending up where you began, but returning to the simple truths with a deeper understanding and appreciation. The Pullman project had started as a business venture, but it had grown into something far more profound. It had become a testament to the power of compassion, to the strength found in community, and to the incredible things that could happen when people opened their hearts to possibility. As Nathan joined the children's game, his laughter mingling with theirs in the crisp autumn air, he knew that this moment, this family, this community, was the greatest success he would ever know. And it had all started with a simple act of kindness on a rainy Chicago morning. What did you think of the story? Please leave a comment with your opinion. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel. I'm sure there will be new videos on this channel that will surprise you. Give it a like and activate the notification bell so you don't miss our next videos. See you soon.